Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion with Meg. Hope you're having a great day. Well, today's topic of discussion is based on dark leadership. As the name suggests, dark leadership refers to some kind of exploitation of the weak by the strong. But how does this impact individuals and organizations is a question. I chose to discuss the impact of this term in a comprehensive manner with one of the leading business experts, Mr. Amer Qureshi. Because of his understanding of the term and also because of his upcoming book named as The Dark Mirror, co-authored with Kesar Abbas. Hello, Amer. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. All is well. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Amer. Well, Amer, I'd like to have your basic understanding about the concept of the dark leadership and also to give us some of the insights about how this term is associated or aligned with the title of your book, The Dark Mirror.
Thank you. I suppose the term dark leadership refers to people who are in leadership position who don't necessarily have the organization or the company's interests at heart. They manipulate, they use people as tools to get ahead, and they're only focused on themselves. And in the process, of course, they do a lot of harm to the organization, to the individuals that they work with. They can affect the mental well-being of people that they're working with. So essentially, they cause a lot of harm. And the reason why we are so focused and talking about this topic is that when we wrote our first book, Leadership Insights, talking about qualities and attributes of good leaders, we talked about, what it takes to be a good and successful leader.
Great. I'll definitely be reading it, and then we'll have a discussion on the book as well.
Sure.
Well, Amer, back to the topic, I'd like to know that how can we actually spot the dark leaders in organization and institutions, and also what could be the ways to mitigate the impact?
Well, I suppose it's dark leadership is sometimes difficult to uncover simply because these people that we are talking about, the type of leaders, they are very correct in terms of how they conduct themselves publicly. In other words, their public persona is often different from what they're like in a private situation or in meetings behind closed doors and stuff like that. So that's why it's always difficult to identify these people because, when you meet them, they're charming, they have lots of outward qualities, but in the workplace, they do have the dark side, which comes out when they're under pressure, when it's a crisis situation, when they're having a meeting with their staff, and so on. And the sorts of things that you have to look out for in terms of clues of someone has a dark leadership type personality, because some people may actually have a personality issues. They could be psychopathic, they could have narcissist tendencies and all of that. So it's not something to be taken lightly. Now, that being said, these people are ones who do not like people disagreeing with them in a meeting, in a workplace environment. They always want their own way. They're always thinking about how to glorify themselves, how to make themselves look good. So it's more about them. It's not about the organization or about the team. They also like to take unnecessary risks. Sometimes, some of the risks they may take may jeopardize the entire organization, but they're willing to take these bets in the hope that it'll further their own personal interests and not always be concerned about the company or the organization that they're working.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe since I'm diving into the psychological behavior of such individuals, I'd like to know that do these individuals operate, or you can say function the same way in other departments of life, like in their families, in their workplace? Obviously in their workplace. What about their behavior in some other places in life? Maybe they're different, or they have the same kind of behavior too.
I suppose it depends on the extent of, for example, if it's someone with narcissistic tendencies, it depends on, how strong these tendencies are. If they're, let's say, on the mild side, maybe they can compartmentalize and separate different parts of their life, and they might be totally different at home. However, if these tendencies are much more inbuilt in them, then it's difficult for them to keep this facade. Whether it's at home, whether it's at work, this personality disorder that they have would come out, and so they cannot sort of control themselves that easily.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I agree with you. So what kind of steps should be taken by organizations and institutions, since it's more harmful for an organization as it impacts at a massive level? for them being on a leadership position. What do you think that how can we spread awareness to exclude such kind of people from the organizational setup, and or you can say minimize their exercise of dark leadership into that environment?
So, first of all, we have to talk about whose responsibility it is to stop these people from taking foothold within the organization. If we talk about large companies, well-established organizations, there's generally a board of directors. So it is the board's responsibility to make sure that these people are kept in check. That's the first point. The second thing is, in the book, we are talking about a 3-tiered strategy to keep these people in check. And the first one is very simple. When you're recruiting people, when you're recruiting leadership team members, when you're recruiting the CEO, you need to have a comprehensive recruitment strategy. It's not just enough to, go on the basis of someone's CV or whatever. I'm talking about doing psychometric testing. I'm talking about interviews which are much more focused on culture, values, and these kind of things, rather than looking at people's technical backgrounds or their track record. I'm also thinking about the fact that when it comes to reference checking, it's usually a very basic kind of reference checking that's done. So we're talking about increasing the intensity, focusing on cultural aspects, looking at their values before we recruit someone. The second thing is, when they're in the role, then it's again the board's responsibility to make sure that their performance is managed. So performance management systems in most organizations are very basic. As long as a company or the organization is doing financially, the CEO gets a tick and everyone's happy. They receive their bonuses and so on. While that's happening, they could be ruining the culture. They could be making sure that the company does not survive beyond, the short term. So the performance assessment system needs to take all of that into account. And the third thing that's linked to it is the rewarding of the CEO. So mostly the CEOs and the leaders receive big bonuses, big fat paychecks when they produce good financial results. But that should also be linked to how they're building the culture, how the organization is. They need to speak to the employees. They need to speak to people who work with before they give them these big fat checks. Because it could be that, yes, they produce results in the short term, but in the long term, they've created an organization which is not sustainable, where the culture is toxic, where people and the talent is walking out the door. So these are my big three tips.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is quite clear that identifying such individuals, especially on a leadership position, is quite hard. And then taking a stand against them and holding them accountable is not an easy job. Obviously, the board of directors have to take responsibility of this thing. But obviously, it is important to foster a healthy environment in the company. Absolutely, Amer. Thank you very much for this clear insight. Obviously, it is very difficult to identify such individuals exercising such kind of practices in the organization. And it is the responsibility of the board of directors, as well as, I believe it is the responsibility of the people as well, to have at least awareness about holding leaders accountable as well. Because when this attitude changes, only then the change for the revolution takes place as well, and the board of directors or the people at a higher position can take this thing serious as well.
Yes, and I think since we're talking about the board and people who have the governance responsibility, it is part of their responsibility to put the systems in place so that anyone who wants to raise an issue can actually do that without the fear of being either removed or fired and so on. Yeah. Because, in most countries, they have very strong whistleblower laws, which require companies to provide protection to anyone who raises an issue. And a lot of toxic leadership is highlighted by whistleblowers who actually highlight problems that are taking place which nobody else would have known about unless and until they speak up. So the board's responsibility is to make sure these kind of systems are in there. In most countries, like for example in Australia, there's a huge fine if your whistleblowing policies are not up to scratch. So there is no option. But in other jurisdictions, the board still needs to make sure these policies are in place to protect those who want to raise a voice against these dark leaders, because you should encourage that. We don't always have to agree on everything. The leader has the responsibility of running the organization, but those around him or her also have an obligation to speak their mind and be truthful with their opinions. And that's one way of minimizing the harm that these people can do.
So, Amer, since these people develop some of the narcissistic traits in their personalities, do you think that these people can change their attitude with time or with some kind of psychological therapies or some kind of training provided to the leaders as well within the organization so that they can operate well and they can understand?
It depends, I suppose. And I think short answer is yes, it is possible. To what degree really depends on the person and their willingness to change, the willingness to firstly accept that there is a problem and then setting about finding a solution. And with the right amount of self-awareness, with the right amount of coaching and mentoring, there can definitely be improvements in their behavior and the way they treat other people and so on. The only problem is that there has to be a compulsion to change. It's like most of us, we don't like changing the way we do certain things. Especially once you get to a certain age, there isn't always a desire or willingness to change. But if these people decide they are willing to change, if they get pushed into a situation where they have to change, the board demands it. So, for example, in one of the situations that we've quoted in the book, the board actually gave the CEO two options. Either you can leave or you can change the way you approach your job and your leadership strategies. And in this particular case, the CEO decided he didn't want to leave. He wanted to work on himself and improve the way he conducts himself within the company and so on. And so he was assigned a coach, a mentor, and he worked very closely with that person. And over time, you could see that he made a real attempt to change. And that worked well for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Amer, for giving us your precious time once again and sharing your valuable insights with us. See you again with some new insights and with some new topics to discuss.
Thank you.